It's really great to be here today. I'm going to talk about AI as a design partner and how to get the most out of AI tools to scale your process. And I am a senior project designer at Google working on the video AI program, but I also work as an instructional designer for the product inclusion and equity team. And I consider myself to be a systems designer, which is different from design systems. So I work about designing things at scale. And previously, I've been on some other teams, like at some health tech startups, and then also at Google Nest. Today we're going to talk about using AI to scale collaborative product design. And during our journey, we're going to be doing a deep dive in designing for all and what that means at scale, and how you can use AI tools to systematize your user journey creation process. We're going to talk through some additional AI-powered design sprint methods, and then augmenting versus automating your design process. So when we talk about AI, you might hear like Gen AI or Gen UI or AI. What I'm talking about today is using massive data sets of text and code to learn patterns of human behavior and language in order to generate coherent and meaningful content. And content can be like components or text or imagery or video, and we're seeing all kinds of combinations now, which is really exciting. And why is this topic important to us, and why is it important now? So we're at the beginning of this wave of AI, which is really exciting. And I think as product creators, we have the opportunity to build in better processes at the very beginning. So as a product creator, I'm talking about anyone who's a designer or researcher or writer or anyone involved in the digital product creation process. And these people are very busy. They're balancing many priorities all at the same time, which could include your business goals or a leadership ask or user needs or team goals. And it's just a lot of balls to keep in the air. And sometimes users or features or a goal or something, they can fall through the cracks. But with Gen AI tools, you can now balance all of these things at the same time and be more systematic in your process. And you can leverage AI to design for everyone. So those features or tools you may have left out during manual processes, now you can build in systems from the very beginning so that you're not unintentionally excluding anyone. So you can have a more systematized versus manual process. But this sounds really great. So how can we do this in practice? So I'm going to talk through a couple different case studies, and I'm going to go through a lot of content. So please save questions, and we can talk about it at the end. So I'm going to talk specifically about using Gen AI for product inclusion and equity design. So what does designing for everyone really mean? Product inclusion and equity is the process of building belonging through all of our products by designing for the most marginalized voices at every phase of the product creation process. So this is the goal of design for product inclusion and equity. And I think with Gen AI tools, we can now actually do this instead of thinking it as kind of an afterthought in our process. So I think there's a couple different pillars. First one is documentation, such as documenting user flows, such as critical user journeys. Some teams call these things like jobs to be done or user stories. I'm going to call these critical user journeys or CUJs throughout this talk. The next pillar is ideation. So during your collaborative product design methods, such as design sprints or workshops. And then the third pillar is taking all of this information and then synthesizing, organizing, and prioritizing it. And in this way, as product creators, you can be more systematic, you can scale yourself, and you can have more speed and execution. And you can design more intentionally to avoid exclusion, which in this famous quote, if you do not intentionally, deliberately, and proactively include, you will unintentionally exclude. A recent Kantar study shows that consumers actually really want this as well. So the majority of consumers say it's important to them that companies they buy from are actively promoting diversity and inclusion in their practices, in their products, and in their features. And let's look at some other data more in depth as well. So just kind of keep these numbers in the back of your mind as we're going through this. So 1 out of 7, what is this referring to? Nearly 1 out of 7, or 15% of the world's population, have a disability, which is a huge amount of people. How about 1 out of 5? This is people older than 50 by 2050, which is also a large group of people. What about 700 million? By 2050, there could be over 700 million people with disabling hearing loss. So what these numbers are showing is that there are actually large parts of the population who have all kinds of abilities, which we refer to as disability. And they actually might be, instead of the minority, they might be a large group of your users, or even potentially the majority of your users in your product creation process. But as product creators, we know that, like, we know we are designing for everyone, and we do our best to make sure that we're doing that. So we're designing for situational and temporary disabilities, which could mean like you're cooking, or your hands are busy, or you're on a bumpy train and it's, you're moving around a lot, or you're in a large room, or you're hard of hearing. Or another example could be you've broken your arm, you're carrying a large package or something, you can only use one hand. And also permanent disabilities, such as like being blind or neurodivergent, or color blindness and things like that. We're also designing for experiences such as multimodality. So this means if you're using an app on your phone, you want to be able to go to your tablet or your smartwatch and have a seamless experience across all of those devices. And we know that we're designing for everyone, but sometimes things fall through the cracks, as I mentioned before. So what happens when we don't do this? These are some headlines that I've pulled out, and I'll read through a few of these. Alexa, why are women 47% more likely than men to get seriously injured in a car crash? Or how self-tracking apps exclude women? Or Google fixed its racist algorithm by removing gorillas from its image labeling tech. Or this one a few years ago, Twitter's audio tweets revealed an accessibility miss, and now the company wants to fix it. So Twitter had released a feature that didn't have an audio component. So it was a big accessibility miss for the product. And we can avoid these things from happening by systematizing our critical user journeys. So as individuals, we all have different dimensions of identity, which are hidden or visible identities, which define who we are, how we think, and how we interact with others. So that can be your education or culture or age or experience. And I'm going to use this list of dimensions of identity for this exercise, but sometimes these are often changing. Some are being added or refined. But for our purposes, we'll use this list. And these identities can intersect and inform new complex identities. So your age might interact with your gender or your race, your ethnicity, and creates these individuals who have really complex needs and identities, which are not defined by the individual identity alone. And if we take the dimensions of identity and apply it to our systematizing process, what we can do is write inclusive user flows using the dimensions of identity from the very beginning. Next, we can consider intersectionality. So these are the people who identify with these multiple groups, traits, and attributes, and then how these things work together to define complex identity described by the individual attributes alone. And if we're going to break down user journeys even more, as a low vision user, I'm able to complete device setup in under 30 seconds. And if I'm actually rewriting this using the dimensions of identity, I could do something like, as a Spanish-speaking user, or as a non-tech-savvy user, and I can repeat that with all of the other dimensions of identity. And as you see, if you're actually doing this for all of the dimensions and then intersectionality, it can be a huge long list and a very manual process, and you still might miss some of these different dimensions. So I'm going to break this down even more using Gen AI. So if you're breaking down what is a critical user journey, which we'll need for the exercise, as a user type, I want to goal so I can task. So in this example, I'm going to use this hypothetical app that I made up called the Pawpaw app. So as a dog owner, I want to use the Papa app to find people near me to walk my dog by searching nearby. So if you're following along or you want to do this later, you can open Bard, ChatGPT, or another conversational AI tool of your choice. I've tried it with both of these, and this exercise works great. So first, you want to make sure you have elements of a good prompt design. So you need to describe in detail your step-by-step guide by mapping out the experience of the tasks and steps. Next, you want to define the persona. So who is this model pretending to be? In this case, we're prompting with the dimensions of identity. And next, provide good examples. So what kind of formatting or writing style are you looking for? Are you expecting them to return an answer in a very specific format? So you need to prompt the model with that. And also the constraints. So this is very important because if you don't provide enough defined constraints, the model can maybe hallucinate or not provide helpful information. And then next, provide the chain of prompts. So you might have to go back and refine the original ask and probe for more detail. So if originally you prompt asking for a CUJ and it doesn't work for you, you need to go back and refine it rather than assume that it's just not working. So if we're going to open Bard to ChatGPT, let's give this a try. So you can take the dimensions of identity and ask the model to write 10 different examples per identity and with the constraint of one-word answers. So you take accessibility and age and gender and the whole list, and this will output a list which we'll use in the next exercise. And using this example, I've taken my prompt here, which is my hypothetical app. Papa app is a dog walking mobile app, a two-sided marketplace that connects dog owners, yada, yada, yada. And then below, I put the prompt. Using the above product for reference, rewrite this critical user journey and write additional user journeys for each dimension. And here's where I input my user journey, and then I ask it to replace the dimension, which is blind, with the following dimensions of identity. And here is where you put that list that you output in the previous exercise. And if you want to go into more detail and be more refined, I would provide as much detail about your feature or product as possible. This could be a huge long list, like this prompt here. I won't go through all of this, but if you are following along, we can share these slides out later if you want to see. And then you can also do this with other things like replacing blind with temporary disabilities or permanent disabilities or all kinds of things. And then you ask it to generate a creative task based on those identities. And then go back and repeat with a different dimension of identity. It is possible you can ask the model to do all of the dimensions at once, but I find it's easier to do one at a time. So let's look at this example. I asked the model to output a list of 10 different dimensions of identity, and it put it into a table for me. And then I gave it the constraints and details about my app, and then asked it to rewrite my CUJ based on those different dimensions of identity. And you'll see that it comes up with a very interesting list. Like some of them are a little off the mark. So I might want to go back and refine my previous prompt, but this gives me a really good starting place of critical user journeys based on my dimensions of identity. You can also go back and add additional dimensions of identity and make this list much longer. Now you can take this list and prioritize by your categories, such as business metrics or user types or user goals. You can also use conversational AI tools to find themes or overlap areas, and it can identify those for you all in minutes. Now let's talk through scaling this with other prompt framing. So you can try this with other types of users or modalities. So we were talking about multimodal design. You can ask it to reframe the CUJs based on a mobile app or desktop or a audio-only device, for example. And then also going through and doing temporary disabilities, situational disabilities, or permanent disabilities. For example, using a tool, the GenAI tool, what are the different permanent, situational, or temporary disabilities? Second step is your product prompt. And then using the above product for reference, rewrite this user journey, and then replace that dimension with the following situational disabilities. And it's the same process over and over again. If you do try this method, I would love to hear how it works for you. I've tried this on several teams and products, and it's been very helpful. And now let's talk through a few other sprint methods. So leveraging AI for how might we statements. So how might we's are part of your workshop or design sprint process, and they reframe insights into opportunity areas. So for example, how might we onboard our users to the app with clicks or taps, 2 clicks or taps? So again, you take your product prompt, using the above product for reference, write 10 different how might we statements that focus on the following business priorities. So I've given it the constraint of multimodal design, more inclusive design, or fewer clicks to find a dog walker. And it gives me, outputs a list, and you can ask it to output 100, and then there go back and refine. Next, let's talk through affinity clustering. So affinity clustering is a method that I use a lot. So you take large amounts of information that you have ideated on with your team, using stickies or whiteboards or things like that. It used to take several hours and many people to come up with these ideas, but now you can, in several minutes, use a GenAI tool to find themes between these statements. Like this list on the left is an example of based on my previous prompt. And it just allows you to be more efficient with your time. And abstraction laddering. This is also a really fun one to use with GenAI tools. So abstraction laddering is a technique used to dig deeper into a problem by gradually moving from concrete details to more abstract details. So you start with initial problem statement, you ask why to get more abstract, which is a little bit more outside the box thinking, and you ask how to get more to a more definite statement. The reason I believe that GenAI tools are really great at this is that they're really good at abstract thinking, or I think even going into the realm of hallucination. So as the product creator, you can use this tool as a way to jumpstart your thinking, but we'll talk a little bit more about that later. So looking at this example, what features of the Papa app are important to you as a dog owner? Concrete would be easy scheduling on the Papa app, and more abstract would be things like knowing my dog is being taken care of, or even more abstract is a stress-free life for myself, or the ability to focus on my work and other commitments, or a sense of balance and well-being. And where I think this gets more powerful is when you ask it to come up with hundreds of abstract thoughts. It might get you beyond, or get your team beyond maybe your inside the box thinking, and can get you thinking about things that maybe hadn't come across your team. Next, let's talk about what does this mean for product creators? So augmenting versus automating your process. So a quick note on bias, we want to use these tools to augment, but not entirely replace our design process. So these models are not 100% perfect. I think in the previous talk, we were talking a little bit about bias. So we must stress test the output. As we've seen with, some tools that have come out that, for example, Midjourney is trained on certain images of people which might have bias data, such as racial bias or gender bias, age or occupational bias. So we want to avoid continuing to reinforce this bias. So we do want to make sure that we're either building in mechanisms for detecting the bias in these models, or also just as the product creator auditing them ourselves. So let's put this all together and just talk through the key takeaways from all of this. So a product creator, is balancing a lot of things at the same time. And we can use these tools to enter their intent to scale user journeys using the dimensions of identity. So you can take a critical user journey, put it through a GenAI tool, filtering by the dimensions of identity, and you can have a scaled user output. And you can also do this with intersecting identities. So using a critical user journey and then filtering through the different dimensions and then asking it to review multiple different dimensions at the same time. And to recap a few of the things that we talked about today, ideas that you can take back to your team or your different products. So we talked through systematizing user journeys to scale to all users. And remember that there's bias in the data and it's augmenting, not entirely automating your process. You can either build in guardrails into your model quality itself, or you as a product creator are doing the model quality. You can scale this to other design sprint methods. So today we talked through user journeys, how might we statements, abstraction laddering, and affinity clustering. I think you could also do lots of other types of design sprint methods, and I'd be curious to see what you all have tried. And remember a good prompt structure, and don't be afraid to go back and readjust your original prompts. And thank you so much for your time today. And please reach out if you have any questions about anything or if you've tried these methods. I'd love to hear your feedback. I've linked my website here with some other information about things I work on and also my newsletter. And I look forward to hearing from you all.
Excellent. Thank you very much. That was really good. It's probably one of the most frequently asked questions is, how can I really use AI to speed up my work? And there was a very good tangible example. So thank you for sharing.
Of course.
And just a reminder to everybody out there, we do have a few minutes now, 7 minutes for Q&A. So please ask any questions or any things that talk triggered, and we'll pass those questions through to Kelly. But I'm going to start off, and I'm going to unfortunately be the cold-hearted capitalist now. Say, even with AI speeding that up, why should we spend our time and our money doing this as a pure cold-hearted capitalist when 80% is good enough? We're going to get enough money and we're going to get dwindling returns on that 20%.
Well, I think you can see from those examples, headlines I pulled out, that people are still falling through the cracks. And so it can also be, your company could be losing money by missing out on designing for certain users. So although they might be a minority, it could be perceived as your company is not inclusive, or your company has excluded some users. Also, I think these tools allow us to work more efficiently so we can do these things. So I think as before, it would have taken us a lot of time to ideate in all these processes and potentially design for them. But now I think we can do this much faster. And I'm very excited about things that are, things that Figma is working on, hopefully, to automate some of our design processes so this won't be so repetitive. So I guess I feel like now we actually can do things that used to be very manual. So although it might seem like it's a smaller group of users, they are part of your user group, and you can be saving your company money by including them in your process.
Excellent. And I know from my personal experience working in airlines, there's a lot of legislation coming in now as well. So it's not just purely about the bottom line, it's and reputation, brand reputation, which is very, very important. There are legal fines for not accommodating particular groups of people as well.
I have not heard about the airline stuff, but that's interesting.
It's international travel, so transatlantic. So if you're just doing short haul, I think it's fine, but for international, and I think they've mentioned that they're going to extend it to short haul in the future. So airlines have to be very accessible in their journeys.
Cool.
We have, it's more of a logistics question from Mary. She's asking, is there a link to Kelly's deck that was super valuable? So yeah, if you can share your deck, we'll post that out to people as well.
Yes, I can definitely do that.
Excellent. So we have a question from Cindy. How do we balance our energy using AI and correcting the responses that AI gives us? Because sometimes I spend more time adjusting the response than it would be faster if I just did it myself.
Well, I think that's where you can use, you can do things at scale. So if you get a long list and you say, I want to refine all of this in this way, I think you can ask the Gen AI tools to do it for you. But it, you are getting into a state where you are, instead of creating 10 CUJs, for example, you're doing hundreds. So you have to be able to use these tools to design at scale. I have heard of people doing things like far more complicated, like sampling the data. Like, if you have a list of hundreds, for example, having a script that looks at a couple different CUJs just to spot check them to make sure they're doing what they should be doing, or they're representing the users in the correct way. In an ideal world, you would have your different user groups represented as actual people, and they would be the ones that can actually audit this full list to make sure that you're representing everybody. That's not possible for a lot of companies and teams. So it does add in I think it does add in some odd admin overhead, but I think it's also worth it. I think if you can figure out how to kind of review them at scale, it should be able to help you.
Yeah, it's some great advice. It's I think it's a skill that you just get better at, and once you've learned it, then it, like, the time saving increases and increases.
Yes, definitely.
Excellent. And one other kind of point, just if you do have questions, do send it in. But it's just when you mentioned something there, and I thought it was quite good. In programming, there's a concept of pair programming, where two developers work on the same machine, because it's just that back and forth conversation where it helps them think of better things. And I see, in my personal work, I see ChatGPT as a kind of, or sorry, Bard, as a as a kind of almost a pairing partner, where I can ask it questions and it just gives me some ideas. It's not going to give me the perfect answer that I can just run with and go away, but it gives me enough of kind of a starting point. I find it very helpful.
Yeah, that's a really good way to think of it. It's kind of like you're pairing with the tool in order to create user journeys or workshops or things like that. Yeah, I like that framing.
Well, excellent. We don't have any more questions coming in, and we're just about on time. So I just want to thank you once again, Kelly, for sharing that amazing anecdote of how you're using AI.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.